It's UofL Today on 93.9 The Phil. Here's your host, Mark Hebert.
And welcome to UofL Today with Mark Hebert on 93.9 The Ville. So glad you're joining us for the show that's about all things University of Louisville. Dr. Roberto Bolli is a world-renowned researcher and heart doctor. Some of his studies are using adult stem cells, and they're resulting in remarkable advancements in actually curing heart failure, not just prolonging a person's ability to live with heart problems, but curing heart failure. Welcome, Dr. Bolli. It's good to see you again. Haven't seen you in a little while.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
How you doing?
I'm doing well.
All right, scoot right up to the microphone there, and so we can get you. Well, first of all, we ought to say a little bit about you. Where did you come from? You were born in the United States. Where did you come from, and how did you get to the University of Louisville?
I was born in Italy. I graduated from medical school in Perugia, which is in central Italy, and then I went to the National Institute of Health in Bethesda, outside of Washington, for a research fellowship. And then I went to Baylor College of Medicine to do my clinical training. I was there for a few years as a faculty member. And finally, in 1994, I came to Louisville as chief of cardiology. And I've been here ever since.
Okay, so 1994, you've been in Louisville for however many years
22
that is.
years.
I'm not good at math, so
Right.
22 years in Louisville. We're glad to have you.
Yeah.
I've done a little bit of work with you in the past and talking about your projects you're working on with stem cells. So why don't you talk just in general terms about what your research entails with stem cells and heart tissue?
Sure. So we are trying to find actually a cure for heart failure. Heart failure is a devastating condition. It's becoming more and more common as people get older. There are about 6 million Americans suffering from it, and it's usually caused by a heart attack, which causes the loss of a chunk of heart muscle, if you will, that becomes a scar and does not work. So the heart is unable to pump efficiently, and there is no really cure at the moment. We can give many different medicines. Those medicines can maybe prolong life a little bit, make patients feel better, but they don't solve the fundamental problem, which is the loss of heart muscle. So we are very excited because we finally have a chance to solve the fundamental problem by replacing the dead heart muscle with new muscle, with new tissue that's going to be generated by these adult stem cells that we are using. We have been studying these cells first in experimental models in the lab, and now we are doing clinical trials where we are infusing them in patients with heart failure, and we are looking at their effect on the function of the heart, on the quality of life, on the ability of these patients to exercise and to walk, and various other, hematologic parameters of cardiac function.
This is just incredibly fascinating to me. So the bottom line is, if I have a heart attack, but I live through it, a portion of my heart is damaged, and is that the actual heart
right.
muscle or the tissue, or what is actually damaged?
It's the heart muscle. So every time you have a heart attack, a piece, if you will, of your heart muscle dies. And it can be a small piece, can be an average piece, or it can be a large piece. And of course, the severity of the heart attack depends on how much muscle you lose. Once the muscle is gone, the heart will not replace it. The heart is not able to regenerate itself spontaneously,
right,
so to speak. So you end up with a scar. And of course, that will impair the function of your heart. And as I said, there is no cure for it at the moment.
We're talking with Dr. Roberto Bolli from the University of Louisville, who's working with stem cells on heart tissue and regenerating heart tissue. So the bottom line is this heart tissue that is damaged, the heart can't fix it, can't
Right.
put in new tissue,
Right.
but you maybe can. So how do you do that?
Well, we can isolate some stem cells from the heart itself. It turns out the heart has a small population of stem cells. All of us have them in our tissue, and the job of these cells is to replace the myocytes, which are the heart cells that continuously die during our lifetime. We have a turnover of cells in our heart, right, during our average lifespan. And the new cells that are formed to replace the dying cells come from these stem cells. We call them cardiac stem cells. Again, these are adult stem cells found in everybody's heart. We can isolate them. We can grow them in a dish in vitro. We can make millions of them. We can purify them, separate them, and then we put them back into the same patient from whom we obtain them, so that there is no rejection. And we have very encouraging data in animal models of heart failure, where these cells are very effective in improving the function of the heart. We have done the first human study with these cells here in Louisville at Jewish Hospital. It was called the SCIPIO trial, SCIPIO. That was published in 2011 in The Lancet. And it was the first human study with these cells. And now we are doing a second trial sponsored by the National Institutes of Health, or the NIH, that's called CONCERT. And in this trial, we are testing these cells on a larger scale. So it's a bigger version, if you will, of SCIPIO. It's a phase 2 trial. SCIPIO was a phase 1. This is a phase 2 trial.
So it's further along, and you're testing these, again, on humans, correct?
In humans with heart failure. These are patients who have a heart attack, and because of the heart attack, are in heart failure.
How many patients did you do in the original trial with the SCIPIO, and how many of them are still living?
So in the SCIPIO trial, we treated 20 patients with cardiac stem cells, and of those, I believe 19 are still living.
Wow.
Which is amazing, because the mortality in these patients is fairly high. These are very sick people.
Well, I actually met a guy named Mike Jones,
yes.
who I think was the first one you did.
First
one of the
we
first ones
treated,
you did.
yes, our first
and
patient.
As I recall, he was a grandfather, lived
Yes.
in Spencer County, as I recall, and he had a bad heart attack, was in terrible shape. You did the stem cell transfers. You took good stem cells out of
Yes.
his heart, manipulated them somehow, whatever you do in the science lab, in the
Yes.
Petri dish, put them back in his heart, and he was out running around with his grandkids.
Absolutely, and I become good friends with Mike. So I bring my kids to visit his farm every spring and every fall, and we have a great time together. And he's very active. He can work on his farm. He can drive his tractor to work on the land. He can remodel his house. I mean, he's like a new man.
And he's got basically a new heart.
Yes.
From his own stem cells.
From his own stem cells, absolutely.
And has he had any other problems with, he suffered a heart attack, correct? Or was it a stroke?
Yes, he had a very large heart attack. And, before he received the stem cells, he could barely walk to the bathroom without getting short of breath. And now he's able to work on his farm. I mean, for him, it has been a major, major transformation.
We're talking to Dr. Roberto Bolli, who's a cardiologist and a renowned researcher who is working with stem cells to regenerate heart tissue. And he's doing some trials through the NIH, the National Institutes of Health. All right, Dr. Bolli, so we talked about CONCERT. Let's talk about this second study that you're working on, again involving stem cells. Tell us what that is.
So the second study is called Seneca, and that is a first-in-human study of adult stem cells in cancer survivors who have developed heart failure as a result of the chemotherapy that they have received. There is a class of drugs called anthracyclines, which is very powerful in killing cancer cells, but is also toxic to the heart. And so when patients are treated with anthracyclines, some of them develop severe heart failure for which we have no treatment at the moment. Typically, these are women with breast cancer, or patients, young patients, maybe young adults or teenagers who have lymphomas or leukemias. Again, those are people in whom anthracyclines are frequently used. Well, a few years after they're treated, these patients can develop heart failure, and as I said, there is no treatment. So we are testing the administration of bone marrow stem cells into these patients, hoping to be able to replace the dead muscle which causes the heart failure and to improve their function, and therefore to, in a way, cure, if you will, their heart failure. It is very exciting because it is the first time that any kind of cell therapy has been tried in this patient population.
So this is a little different than the original study where you took the stem
Yes.
cells directly out of the heart of a heart attack victim.
That's
This
right.
is in cancer victims using bone marrow. the stem cells
That's
out of bone marrow.
correct. And so these are mostly women, mostly young patients still. So it's a different population. And we are not using their own bone marrow because there is always the risk that their own bone marrow may contain some cancer cells. And of course, the last thing we want is to infuse cancer cells into these patients. So we are using what we call allogeneic cells, meaning that they are provided by a donor, not by the patient themselves. And these come from a healthy young donor, and they're not rejected because they have a special phenotype that prevents them from being rejected. They've been shown to be effective in other conditions, like in heart attack survivors. And so we're now testing them in cancer survivors.
Who are the folks that are eligible for this type or candidates for this type of surgery? Not just on the Seneca study, but the previous one that you talked about with the heart surgery. Do they have to be young, really healthy folks that we're talking about here, or could it be anybody?
No. Young, healthy folks don't have heart failure typically, so they don't need any.
Well, some do in their
cells,
40s, sometimes, but not,
yeah, if
not
they're
normally.
unfortunate. But
Okay.
typically, so for the first study, which is the concert study, these are people with a heart attack in their past. We are looking at patients typically, they can be any age, but our inclusion criteria are between the ages of 25 and 80. Most of our patients are in their 60s or 70s. And these, again, are people who have had a heart attack in the past, and now they have heart failure. The second trial, Seneca, the age limits are the same, 25 to 80, but these are usually younger patients because they're typically women with breast cancer or adolescents or teenagers with lymphomas or leukemias. And they have, so to be eligible for the study, they must have received chemotherapy with anthracyclines and then have developed heart failure as a result of that.
Gotcha. And the study with the cancer victims, how long does it take? You mentioned that they've got to go through chemotherapy and some other things, but how long does it take once you identify them and say, all right, they may be a candidate for this study? How long does it take by the time you get some bone marrow from a donor and manipulate it or whatever you have to do, inject it into the patient? How long does that process take?
Not very long. So from the moment we enroll patients into Seneca to the time we can treat them, it may be, I would say, 1 to 2 months. Not very long. We need to do some baseline tests. We do an MRI scan to look for the cardiac function. We do several blood tests, electrocardiograms, and other things. And then the cells must be shipped from the manufacturing center to us. So I would say 1 to 2 months.
And how about with the concert study? How long does it take?
Concert takes maybe a little longer because in concert we must grow cells from the heart biopsy of the patient, and that takes 6 to 8 weeks to grow. We want ideally 5 million of these cardiac stem cells, and we are starting out with a very small tissue biopsy of only 20 milligrams of tissue. So we need to grow these cells for 6 to 8 weeks and then do some baseline testing, as I said, looking at heart function. So I would say 2 to 3 months after they enroll.
What are the problems that you found in these two studies? You said 19 of the 20 patients you had in the one study where you used the heart tissue and the heart stem cells, they're still living. So obviously that's turned out well with those 20. But what problems and potential problems did you have overcome in that one? And what problems do you see in this one you're working on right now, the Seneca study?
So in the first study, the CPO trial, we did not really find any adverse effects or any significant problems. It was a first-in-human study, so the main goal was to look for safety of these cells, and we did find safety. In fact, these patients are doing better than they would have done without cells. So that was very encouraging. In this larger trial, which is CONCERT, which will be about 144 patients, so a much larger study than CPO, We are hoping not to find any problem. I can tell you the one thing about stem cells, adult specifically, I'm talking about adult stem cells, is that so far they have been extraordinarily safe. They have been used in many trials all around the world in thousands of patients, and there has not been one single adverse event caused by adult stem cells. This is different from embryonic stem cells, which can cause tumors and teratomas. But in the case of adult stem cells, we now have a lot of patients treated, as I said, all over the world, and we have no side effects.
So when will we start seeing this stem cell therapy as essentially, in these stem cell surgeries, as a part of dealing with heart patients? How many years down the road are we looking at?
Great question. That's what everyone is asking me, and obviously it's important. Well, it takes a while for a new therapy to be approved by the FDA and to go through all the testing necessary to become an approved treatment. So in the stem cell field, we are now doing phase 2 trials, which are intermediate-sized trials. In order for a treatment to be approved, the FDA typically requires what we call phase 3 trials, which are large studies of several hundreds, possibly thousands of patients to document conclusively the efficacy of the treatment. Those trials are ongoing at the moment. I expect it will take 2 or 3 years to know the results of the phase 3 trials. And if those trials are positive, if they do show efficacy with no significant safety concerns, then I expect the cells will be approved. So I would say it will be at least 3 to 4 years until we have the first cell product approved for clinical use. It may be longer depending on how these trials turn out, of course.
And you did the first of its kind study in the world on this, but it sounds like there are other surgeons and researchers also working on the same problem. Is that accurate?
Yes, there are many other investigators using cells, not exactly the cells we are using. We are using cardiac stem cells. Other investigators are using different kinds of cells. But yes, there are many competing products. This is the hottest area of research in cardiovascular medicine at the moment. So you can imagine that, a lot of people are trying to find a cell product that will benefit patients.
Yeah. Dr. Roberto Bolli, it's always fascinating talking to you. This stuff just amazes me. It's like the $6 million man. You're just building a new person with their heart stem cells.
Thank you very much, Mark.
All right. Thanks for being on the program. I appreciate it. The faculty, staff, and students at UofL are engaged in trying to make the world a better place far beyond the classroom. They're working right here in the Louisville community, spending hundreds of thousands of hours working with UofL's community partners in healthcare, social work, engineering, the arts, schools, and many others. Here to talk about that are Henry Cunningham and Pat Smith from UofL's Office of Community Engagement. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hey, thank you.
Good to see you. What's the Office of Community Engagement? Tell me what that is.
Well, the Office of Community Engagement is the central administrative office that oversees engagement work within the university. The goal of the office is to advocate for engagement, support the work of our faculty and our students and our staff, and to provide assistance in determining the direction the university goes in terms of our work in the community, both in our teaching, our research, and the kind of outreach activities that the university is involved in.
So community engagement, it's not just community service work.
No.
Going out and sweeping up the streets or something like that. So it's other stuff, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. When we talk about community engagement, there are different aspects of it. For instance, there's what we call the curricular engagement. That is connecting teaching with the service in the community. As a faculty member, how can you take what you're teaching in the classroom, use those concepts, and have your students apply those concepts to real-world issues? For instance, as a student in nursing, how can you take what you learn in the classroom and apply it in terms of seeing patients in the community? So there's the curricular engagement. There's also engaged scholarship that is connecting research with issues in the community. For example, how can you use your research to find out some of the current problems, issues that in our community, and come up with answers to address those issues. Then, of course, we have outreach, which is the work that we do out in the community, using your intellectual expertise to address concerns that are in the community as well. So we have teaching, research and service.
And that was Henry Cunningham, and we're going to talk to Pat Smith here. Pat, what do you do at the Office of Community Engagement? What's your job?
You know, I kind of like to look at myself a little bit as like a utility outfielder. But
you can't hit, but you're a good fielder.
But one of the things, exactly. One of the things that I put a lot of time into is sort of looking at the breadth of what everyone does around the entire university. We have sort of this mission as a part of U of L to serve the community, whether we mean locally or whether we mean globally. I mean, that's even written into our mission statement as an institution, is providing engaged service and outreach to improve the quality of life for our community. So it's a major part of our DNA and who we are, and it's a big reason our office is here, is to facilitate that. So a little bit of what I do is help to pull together all the stories about this work across all the academic and administrative units.
And your office always puts together, Henry, I guess it's a little cheat sheet of the number of hours. Here it is. You got one handy here, Pat.
There you go.
Yeah. So tell our listeners what we're talking about in terms of the number of hours that faculty, staff, and students put in each year, and how many folks on campus we're talking about that are engaged in something out in the community, either globally or in the Louisville area.
Yeah, I think Pat will talk about that since you received
totally.
those
Okay.
numbers.
I mean, it's just fantastic because to see where this has gone and grown, where you've got literally every school, every college, every administrative unit of our institution sort of involved in service or outreach with the community. So we've got, at any given sort of year, we've got over 1,000 activities that we do in the community. And these sort of like fall on a spectrum where we've got, say, hundreds of deep partnerships with community partners, that sort of where there are formal agreements in place, where there's maybe serious funding behind those. And on the other end of the spectrum, we have a lot of outreach that we do that's sort of more like a day of service, like visiting an old folks home or working with a cleanup organization in a neighborhood, something like that. So, we have a couple thousand faculty involved in this every year. We have tens of thousands of student instances of involvement every year. In our staff, we've got hundreds of staff every year that also get out and get involved in the community.
Well, the numbers I'm looking at here, you said 23,000 instances of student engagement with over 500,000 hours of service just by the students at the University of Louisville.
Yeah.
That's a stunning number. Mm-hmm. It really is.
Yeah. And I think the student connection here is huge. I mean, I think a lot of students, always, but definitely given current times, they want to be involved in the community. They want service opportunities. And I think that they see U of L as a place where they can get involved with neighborhoods, with cities, with their state, and apply what they want to learn to real life issues while making a difference.
And as you said, there's over 2,000 instances of faculty and staff engagement by both of them. What are some examples of that engagement that we're talking about? We always hear as part of the signature partnership about what U of L does in schools, where we have social workers, teachers, trainers, others in these schools in the West End. Mm-hmm. What are some other examples of things that we may not even know about that U of L engages in out in the Louisville community?
Okay. So I want to say here, Mark, that the university engagement effort is not just in West Louisville.
Right, I know
West
that.
Louisville is a signature partnership initiative, but we are all over the city of Louisville. We are also out into the state of Kentucky, and as well as in other parts of the country, as well as internationally. So the engagement with our community is our community at large, the international community as well. So there are projects all over. A few projects I want to mention is one is the Human Rights Advocacy Program, currently being run by the law school. And what this program is, it's a program that advances human rights of immigrants, refugees, and non-citizens. What the law school did is that they did an assessment. They conducted a research, did an assessment, and found out that there were many, many issues that impacts members of the refugee and immigrant community. And so they are working with several community organizations, such as La Casita, for instance. And they're working to address 4 areas. One, they want to address language access for these immigrants, so they have access to that aspect of what needs to be done. They also look at education access for immigrants, making sure they can access schools and education. Healthcare is an important aspect of what is needed by our immigrant community. So they also advocated for healthcare access. And then the fourth thing is how the media portray members of the immigrant community. So the law school is working with these entities in the community to address these 4 areas to ensure that the immigrant population are educated on these different issues and that they have access to what's going on. So that's one program that definitely we don't hear much of, but it's making a big difference to members of the immigrant population.
We're talking with Pat Smith and Henry Cunningham from UofL's Office of Community Engagement. We're talking about what's going on out in the community and worldwide that UofL is dealing with and these partnerships with the community. What are some things, I mean, we just talked about a few projects. Do you think that the average person in Louisville, Kentucky has any idea how many people and how many programs the University of Louisville touches?
You know, I think that's something that we need to do a better job of. I think many people still aren't aware of the huge presence the university has in the community and what UofL is doing in terms of what we are offering, in terms of our intellectual expertise, the research that we are conducting in the community, the fact that we are working with Metro government and the police department to assess, crime situation. That is something that our faculty in the Department of Criminal Justice are conducting. Many people aren't aware of that. The fact that we have so many of our students out in the community, in many of our schools with field placement. We have social workers working with schools with their family resource centers. We have social workers doing an internship with a vast number of organizations in the community. The fact that we have tons of our students involved in various activities as mentors, as tutors in our community, working with young children, low-income individuals. So we have a very big job as a university to publicize the work that we are doing, because many people are many times surprised about what UofL is doing in the community.
Like the dental school offering free exams to, I don't know, hundreds of school kids every year and going to these schools, poor kids that don't get to see a dentist, perhaps. The College of Education is doing lots of training for JCPS teachers. I mean, those are all things that the University of Louisville reaches out on and that we deal with, and it's really good stuff. Is there any talk about making community engagement or community service a part of the graduation requirements at the University of Louisville? I know that's not your bailiwick, but has there been any discussion of that?
That is a major place where sort of engagement touches students is via coursework. And I think that's something that our 21st Century Initiative at the university is very interested in, is how do we increase those opportunities to get students out in the community via their coursework. So that's definitely something that I think all colleges and schools are looking at. Every college and school does a good job at that currently, and I think the issue is how can we continue to be intentional around connecting students with impactful work while giving those students the skills to graduate and learn their professions and disciplines.
Right. Well, if you let's kind of wrap this up, and let me ask you this: if you had to walk out and talk to your mom or somebody that had no idea what the University of Louisville does in community engagement and what they're involved in out in the community, what would you tell Joe Schmo out there that has no clue about the University of Louisville's community engagement efforts? What do you tell them?
I would tell them that the university is engaged in mutually beneficial projects in the community, where we are using our expertise, our time, our talent to address needs that exist in our community. But at the same time, as a university, we are benefiting. Our students are getting real life experiences. So when they leave us, they have a wealth of experience for the job market. Our faculty have opportunities to engage in research to enhance their research agenda. So it's mutually beneficial. The work we're doing benefits not just the community, but it also benefits our faculty and our students and our university.
And I would just add that, for a lot of people that might not realize that, the University of Louisville is sort of nationally recognized as a leader in community engagement. And for any sort of potential students, potential faculty or staff, this is a great place to come if you're interested in serving your community and being involved.
And it's really, as you said, Henry, part of the DNA of the University of Louisville, that people really think about this stuff and are really engaged. And so congratulations to the University of Louisville faculty, staff, and students, and to you all for keeping the fire burning. Appreciate it.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Pat Smith, Henry Cunningham, thanks for being on the program. Again, thanks for listening, and go Cards.